Hey y'all, welcome to Generational Gab. My name's Emily Taylor, and this is our debut episode. I'm so excited to get this rolling. We're going to be talking about our generation, things that affect our generation, how we compare to other generations, and everything in between. This is new for me, so we're going to just take it as it comes. I'm super excited. This week we're talking about sex. I feel like our generation is considered to be known for being able to communicate really effectively about sex and be able to have these types of conversations. And so I'm excited today to get into talking about the way we talk about sex. I've chosen guests this week that I am comfortable with. I think that's a really big factor in being able to openly communicate about sex. I've known my roommate Siobhan since almost the day I arrived here at UVM. She has an interest in talking about our upbringing and how that affects our lenses around sex, which I think will be so awesome for this episode. I also have my dear friend Joey, who is also someone I've known since my first day of being here. He is so positive, so sex positive, so openly him. Knowing someone who's a part of the queer community who is just so authentic has been such an incredible thing to watch and experience and see him grow. And I'm so excited for you all to hear about his journey.
I'm Siobhan Egan. I am a double major, English and Psych. I also have a little bit of a G-Swiss background. I'm really interested in developmental psych, why we think about the things we do, and how that affects us in society. My pronouns are she, her.
Hey everybody, I'm Joey Looney. I am a sophomore here at UVM. I use he, him pronouns.
I want to talk a little bit about what sex positivity is because it will come up a lot throughout this podcast. It's a social movement hoping to change cultural attitudes and norms towards sexuality and normalize a completely natural part of the human experience. Some really important concepts that are being expanded on in sex positivity are safer sex practices, consensual sex, gender expression and orientation, and your relationship to your body and how that affects your sex practices. All my information on sex positivity and defining sex positivity comes from the International Society on Sexual Medicine, if you want to look into it more.
We're definitely getting more sex positive, but with heterosexual relationships rather than homosexual, queer, curious. We're definitely not positively in that mindset yet. We still have a really, really long way to go.
I think the first thing that comes to mind with that is how maybe easy access sex is with our interconnectedness on social media.
This is what my guests talked about when I asked them about sex positivity in the modern era. We'll dive into both of these topics, including technology and heteronormativity. To start off, we're going to talk about something that came up in both of my interviews.
Unfortunately, but I feel like for gay people especially, they learn how to have sex from watching porn, which is so problematic because porn is obviously not at all what sex is like.
Not representative.
Not representative one bit.
When I brought up the internet to my interviewees, they all started talking about porn. As digital natives, porn has inherently shaped and changed who we are when it comes to talking about sex, our lenses and perspectives on sex, and everything in between.
Yeah. Let's start to normalize porn and pornography.
Yeah.
Because that is affecting younger generations, and I think that is a huge issue too with sex positivity and how we view sex.
Mm-hmm.
Is when you're young, you're going online and you're trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Our sex education system isn't doing that.
Right.
And that is going to affect how you view sex for a big portion of your life until maybe you learn otherwise. But that, like, how you view it online is how you're going to view gender roles. also within sex and
Yeah.
how you're going to see yourself and your partner.
But there are also great positives to living in this internet world.
I think the internet was a great thing. I think the internet is super important, that the internet and social media exists for queer people, and if it didn't, I don't think the community would be as strong as it is.
Something Siobhan brought up while talking about the internet and porn is that we lean on the internet for things that we don't learn in the classroom. How many times have you Googled something in the middle of the day because someone was talking about it and you just wanted to know what it was? Growing up, we did that all the time. I mean, I know I looked up how to kiss when I was in middle school, and I'm sure that's almost a universal experience. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm embarrassing myself. But my point is, there's something going on with our education system and the way that we were taught about sex that has made us lean heavily on the internet.
So here's a question. When are we going to start teaching about asexuality and like being two and non-binary? Mine was abstinence, my sex education.
But you went to Catholic school.
I did.
I had a public school and a private school experience with sex education, and my public school experience was very much anatomy.
Oh boy.
This is how your body's going to change, and this is how you keep yourself clean.
Everyone loves those.
It wasn't really ever about sex. And then when I got to high school, and I went to private school for high school, we actually had small groups, like 8 people, and a female teacher. And you'd sit in groups, and you'd have every week for, I think it was maybe like 8 weeks.
For those few weeks, we sat in that classroom in that small group, the 8 of us girls talking to our school nurse, because that was the leader of our group, about healthy relationships, unhealthy relationships, sex, being comfortable in your own body. I think there was even one time when she asked us how comfortable we were with anal and if we had any questions. And it was absurd at the time to me, but looking back, probably is the best version of sex ed that you can get.
But in my G-Swiss class, we were talking about ways you can lose your virginity, and we were going through it, because virginity is also...
It's not just penetration.
Oh, no.
Oh, girl.
It is not just PVP.
No.
Penile vaginal penetration. PVP. We were talking about this broad spectrum. We were writing it all on the board. And, oral, PVP, heavy petting, whatever it might be. And I was like, hello, is anyone gonna say anal? Why did no one said it?
Yeah.
Let's represent some other people here.
There's
besides the heterosexual.
Yeah. When you're in a heterosexual relationship, you consider penetration sex.
Right.
And that, oral sex and all that stuff is not really on the same level.
In a one-sentence answer, what do you think the theme of your sex education was?
Abstinence. Heterosexual sex and abstinence. The theme of just don't have sex.
Don't get pregnant.
Don't have sex, don't get pregnant. And, I mean, I didn't even know I was gay when I took sex education in 7th grade and 8th grade, I think, for half of the year. Honestly, maybe it was only 8th grade, and I didn't really realize I was gay until freshman year, the year after that, and no one had ever told me that was an option. Even if I had that attraction, it was just something. It wasn't an actual identity. It wasn't, oh, I'm gonna have sex with men.
I don't think I have a grasp on all sexuality's possible sex lives,
Yeah.
And it's not just me. There's a lot of straight people out there who have no clue. And it's that's not sex positive to me.
And they should, because plenty of people are questioning their sexuality, but because there's not proper education on what non-heterosexual sex is, it is more difficult for people who are questioning or not out and really inexperienced to have sex and be sexually active. I think something that I experienced all the time in high school, growing up, when I was coming out to people and I had my first boyfriend and I was trying to explain to friends, like, oh yeah, like, we hooked up, like, whatever. Like, none of my friends knew what gay sex was, what it entails, and this goes for any, like, non-heterosexual sex. And I found myself having to explain it to them, and at the time I was like, whatever, like, someone's gonna have to educate them. But I've seen and read a lot of different things that are saying, like, you don't owe it to straight people to explain your sex, like, that's your business.
Yeah.
But I was in a vulnerable position as I'm like young and first coming out, so like I didn't really see that perspective, and now it's like I wouldn't really explain to someone how to have gay sex.
Sex education is just like textbook facts. Basically not trying to raise pregnancy rates. No one is worried about how we're thinking or feeling about sex in the education system.
And I think us talking about our experience with sex education and other stories I've heard about sex education in your early life show this phenomena that they're not really thinking about what we need or want to hear.
Maybe if we educate ourselves more, we're going to be thinking more positively about sex as a big picture.
So I'm sure you're wondering now what the next step is in learning so we can expand our perspectives and our framing when it comes to sex and inclusivity and making sure we are knowledgeable on what we need to be in order to function in society.
GSWIS is Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies. So right now, I took that basic level last year. Right now I'm in Sociology of Sexualities. And I would recommend GSWIS just to have a greater grasp on what is happening out there in the world, because we see it and we definitely have internal thoughts, but like to talk it through with an educated professor. Let's ask those questions. We all have questions.
Yeah.
Let's get some answers. Let's talk through them together as a generation. Let's see what's going on. But GSWIS, I would recommend to everyone. We have a great department here.
We started this conversation by talking about our sex education experience growing up, and we've discovered that there is a gap in the way that we learned about sex, and thus a gap in the way we talk about sex. So as someone who's heterosexual, what do you think are the stigmas that still remain around sex in your life? Because I know we talked about how you think there's a gap with the way we talk about homosexual, queer, and questioning folks' sex and understanding that educationally. But are there any remaining stigmas around heterosexual sex? Is there room to grow there too?
I think for a large part, we're not as far as heterosexual relationships, we're not on an equal playing field yet.
Oh no.
We're far from it. In the media, women are still viewed as like this submissive. There's still so many negative connotations, and if we're going to continue to view women that way, then we can't have a positive mindset for how we talk about sex positivity until we change what we're putting out there.
You have to unlearn a lot of things to build back up.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that some of these skewed and problematic biases around heterosexual sex also come up in queer sex.
There was a lot of misunderstandings, and people inevitably, as we live in a heteronormative society, have a viewpoint that gay sex has to be penetrative and it has to be one person is always the man, the top, the dominant person, one person is always the submissive, the bottom, like the woman, and that's so not true, and people still believe that and struggle to understand the differences in queer sex and how it's not just black and white. It's not, you can't compare it to heterosexual sex.
I mean, Joey said it best. We live in a heteronormative society, and that society is also a patriarchy. So inevitably, there's going to be disparities in the way that our education is written because it's written for those heterosexual men.
Straight people, I think probably straight men the most. I mean, most of our systems are suited for straight men.
Mainstream education, in Joey's words, is
completely erasing queer people from sex, and it invalidates queer people, and it makes people less likely to come out and makes people feel shame around sex. I think shame around sex is a feeling that everyone has probably felt. It's probably more common with women and queer people. For queer people, at least, I can say that there's more of a level of shame around and secrecy around queer sex because you're not taught it, so you're not told that it exists. When everyone has the talk with their parents about what sex is when you're, I don't know, like 13. I did with my dad. I'll tell you, it was not about the sex that I'm having. It's just another thing that invalidates queer people.
Yeah. So our mainstream education has contributed to this expansion of stigma and continual views of specific roles and positions, I guess, in sex. How do we see everything we've talked about today coming into play at UVM?
I'd say UVM is pretty known for being super open regarding sexuality. But let's not pretend that deep down there's plenty of people on this campus who are uncomfortable with it. And that comes from your past, how you're learning about it, how you're first being introduced to it. I'd say UVM. UVM's great it's a great fostering environment, supportive. You have great professors, especially I found in my little G-Swiss department. Like, the professors are great talking about where are we at, why is that where we are, and how can we help. Let's not shame, but how can we help the people around us who are not where the rest of us are?
Yeah.
I think it's important to discuss really quickly some of the shortcomings of the research and the terminology we may have used today. So we're going to touch on that really quickly.
But there's not a ton of research on us as a generation yet because we are still so young.
Yeah.
There's several gaps in the way we view sex positivity, but gaps in the research that we need to be questioning calling into question.
How are we defining sex? And what is going through the minds of these young people? And then I think that's going to translate into what you're talking about with sex positivity. And this might be a hot take. Sometimes I think gender roles, as far as sex, are getting stronger because of what is being portrayed in the media. Yeah, we were progressing as a generational, mindset, but then what is being portrayed and what younger people are seeing, people in middle school, upper elementary school, what they're seeing is going to bring us back to more traditional
in that cyclical.
So I think some things that we've discovered here today is that technology, specifically pornography, affected our upbringing along with education, which ultimately ended up changing the way at least the three of us talk about sex and think about sex. And so surely other people in our generation might feel this way as well. Furthermore, the heteronormative patriarchal society that we live under further creates gaps in sex positivity and the way we might talk about sex. And filling those gaps is extremely important to continuing the expansion of sex positivity in our generation.
I think sex positivity is an individual journey. How comfortable are you?
I think the sex education I got from my schooling definitely gave me absolutely nothing. So I had to learn from experience and whatever other media I could find, but on the path of sex positivity, it definitely took a while for me to get to the way I feel about sex now, which is something that people engage in.
Mm-hmm.
And the first few times having sex, there was a lot of like shame and secrecy around it. I think that it's taken a while for me to kind of say to myself, like, I'm my own sexual being and I don't need to have shame around that,
Mm-hmm.
because sex is for everyone and there's no sex that can be invalidated or told that it's not right just because it's not. I think that puts queer people on a journey that a lot of straight people maybe don't face because they don't have to. They don't have to go searching for things about their identity,
their community.
And I think that makes sex different for straight people versus queer people, because queer people are told that it's always wrong and invalid and shameful.
And I want to leave you with that sex is for everyone, and no one should feel invalidated or shame around being their fully realized sexual self. I want to thank you so much for listening to our debut episode. I had so much fun making it, and I'm really excited to try some new things next time, keep some old things, and keep evolving with this podcast. If you are looking for a platform and you have an opinion or a voice that you want to share, please give us an email at vtcynicpodcasts@uvm.edu. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to have you on. See you next time. Bye.